Okay, so I have here my Repel that I went and signed up for a repel.it account and created this thing. Mine has actually a few files in it. You can add more files if you want. So if you want like a notes, right? Like here are my lecture notes. Be aware that by default, when you press run, it only runs the content of the main file here.
Is there a way to change that?
Yeah, you can import the others.
Oh.
But the main file is like that main tab in the processing sketch. That's the one that happens.
Oh, no, I meant, is there a way to get it to run an entry point that isn't in main.py? Or is it like Java where it'll only run public static void main and it won't run anything else?
I think the way Repel's set up is that it'll only run main, but I could be wrong on that.
I've done a little bit of Python and PyCharm, and I never got the way to map it there either.
Yeah, I think that's set, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, you may as well just assume that it's going to run what's in the main py file. And for now, you can write all your stuff in the main, and that'll be totally fine. So what we were just talking about, the statically versus dynamically typed, let me come up with an example. So I don't really know anything about this language, right? Like, here I am, blank page. I want it to do something. So I'm going to try some stuff I know. I'm going to be like, all right, x is 3, semicolon, print. You guys see how it's kind of helping me along? It's like, oh, you need to print and values and like stuff, separation and file flush. Like, I don't know what much of this stuff means, right? But there's little like snippets of explanation down here. Where would I go if I wasn't sure? Yeah, like freaking Google it, right?
You literally like go on Google and be like Python cheat sheet.
Yeah, totally. In this week's notes, there are 2 places I recommend that you go. Those 2 places are the Python documentation, which is at docs.python.org, right? So this is the Python Foundation. There's a tutorial and a beginner's guide and a whole bunch of other stuff in here. That's a good one. And then the other one is the W3 Schools Python tutorial page, which is really, really nice, yeah, and has a mess of stuff organized in a sensical way. I don't know why my sizing is all jacked up today. So like if you're unsure of something, start in here. This is a good place. Oh look, there's how the print command works. Looks like I can just do print, parens, and a string inside. Cool. So I'm going to print hello, I guess. And then maybe I'll print that variable x just for kicks. Oops, run. Oh, okay. Did you guys see what happened? So I hit run.
It printed hello in 3.
It printed hello in 3, even though I didn't have semicolons over here. Turns out Python doesn't need the semicolons.
Because it's dynamic.
That's just a syntax thing for the language. So some languages require line-end characters. Those line-end characters take a variety of forms. Usually they're a semicolon or a comma or something kind of similar, punctuation-y. This one doesn't require a line-end character.
Is it because when you hit enter, it counts it as ending that sequence?
Yeah, Python does a lot of kind of line break and tabbing. So tabs and line breaks are important in Python. That's not true in all languages. It's true in this one. You do have to be extremely, extremely careful with tabbing in Python. So I'll show you why here in a bit. Here's that dynamically typed thing we were talking about. You can reassign this to like, so I said x is 3, and then I have print hello, and then I have x is this, and then I printed x. What do I expect this to do? really frankly, from my experience with processing, I expect this to yell at me. I expect it to say, X is an int. What are you doing? You can't assign a string to an int. That's not how life works. But welcome to Python. This very happily will overwrite your number with a string and just go on with its life.
So it's the last indication takes precedent.
Yeah, so X was 3. If I had done print X here, then this would print 3, this line, because that's what's stored in X when it gets to that line. Then at this line, I'm overwriting 3 with this, and then when I print X, I get this out. You guys see that? So you have to be a little bit careful with Python code because it will let you overwrite things in weird ways. So oftentimes when Python's not acting the way you expected it to, right? You've written some piece of code and it doesn't work the way you were expecting. Sometimes what's going on is you have mistyped a variable's name for a similar thing and reassigned a string over the top of the number you're dealing with, or reassigned a number over the top of the string you wanted. Does that kind of make sense? So this is a good spot to point out that you really should be careful with variable names. Strings in this language also allow you some more flexibility. So you can declare strings with either the single quotes or double quotes. So here I've declared this, I've printed the string hello world with double quotes. Earlier I printed the string this that had single quotes. Python doesn't care. The reason you might want to do this is something like, if I've got a string with double quotes and I've got a single quote in it, it won't kick and scream about having a string type that started and not ended. So if you want to include a single quote, use double quotes.
So if you run it with 3 of like the single quotes, right? Will it just not run, or is this one of those languages you have to be really careful?
You mean if I do this guy?
Your computer, yeah.
So in this, I have a double quote and then a single quote. My expectation is that'll print this stuff with the single quotes printed out.
Okay. Is backspace limited as well? Can you use backspace to escape characters as well in a string model?
So if you throw in an escape character, like say you wanted to actually print out a double quote, if you do a backslash, it'll print that double quote for you. This language doesn't yell at you about unnecessary escapes. Depending on the compiler you download, it might yell at you about having unnecessary escape characters. That's not a syntax error, it's just a, like, dude, clean up your code error. Right, like, I don't actually need these, they're not doing anything. This one in the middle is doing something. If I try to get rid of that, you guys see how it now thinks that this junk is supposed to be a variable's name? It's not a variable's name, so it's going to shout at me. The debugging in Python 2 is just a little bit less helpful. The Repel IDE is very convenient, but it is just a touch less helpful than the processing one. It'll tell you usually where there's an error. Right, so this is giving me which line it's on, right? So it's main py is the file, it's on line 5, it's in this little spot here. It's telling me that's invalid syntax. It's not telling me exactly what the error is, right? But I can usually sort it out. Okay. Let's see, other things you can do with strings in this language that are kind of fun. You can treat a string like an array. So my expectation here is that this would do what? So what's in X right now?
It's just going to print X 2 times for however many elements are in the array.
Okay, so that's a cool thought. That's actually this one. So if I did print and I do X times 2, that'll print this. Or it'll print X twice, basically. This one's doing something just a touch stranger. It's treating the string like an array. So this is my string, right? So it's like this is the 0 character. Oops. T is the 0 character. H is the first character.
So it's just going to print TH?
It's just going to print I, the character in the 2 slot, if that was an array.
Oh, okay.
Right, so that'd be T is 0, H is 1, I is 2, S is 3.
So is that because it immediately considers this an array, and therefore when you just put it out there, it's like, oh, I know what you're talking about?
Yeah, in Python, strings are thought of as arrays. That lets you do some nice things like, okay, I can print the first letter pretty easily. If you want to print the last letter, there's a kind of cool trick. If instead of doing 2, you do -1. Right, because 0 is the first thing, -1 is the thing before the first thing, and it loops around and grabs the last one. So if you want to print the last letter of a string, that's a convenient way to do it. Why you'd want to do that.
So wait, can you have something in no, because it only calls on one thing when you, like, you can't have 2 times something, or like you have to have another array for each letter. For example, if you want to print like THI.
Oh, if I wanted to print the first 3 things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a slicer. And I think that'll work.
So yeah, that works.
So that would be the first, so that's up to the second slot, not including the second slot. If you wanted the first thing to the third thing, that'd be so this should be the first thing in slot 1 and the thing in slot 2. Yeah, so okay. Thing in slot 1, thing in slot 2. So this is how you slice a string up if you want to.
I really wish jobs.
Yeah, this is actually a really convenient thing for like parsing user commands.
And it wraps around too, and you can do like negative numbers as well, so you can wrap around past the beginning of the string to the end.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a nice convenient tool for slicing up user input. There's a thing called regex that's not covered in this class that is covered in the kind of further programming class that allows you to do better slicing. But this is a good start for today, right? Okay, so next things next. Oh, there's a length function you can do to a string. So if you want to know how many characters are in a string, and then of course, now that I've fed this a string with quotes in it, I'm wondering, does it count the quotes? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, screw it. Let's do a simpler thing. Bugger. Okay. So you can see that it's only counting the things in between the quotes because the quotes themselves are part of saying that thing's a string. So if you want to know how many letters are in supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, one, you have to figure out how to spell the silly thing. But if you can spell it, you can put that in here. And the answer is 34.
The sad part is if you can spell it, can't you just count how many buttons you push it?
Yeah. Right. So this is nice for parsing user input again. You pretty often have have a case for how long is this string? I want this first letter, this second letter, the third letter, or I want to split the first 3 off into a code, the middle 4 or something else, and the last 5 or something else. That happens like when we're dealing with your guys' student email addresses, right? Like if I want your W number, that's the first, I don't know, what, 6 or 7 numbers of your email address. So if I had your email addresses in a big file, I could use a parser like this to split off the student IDs. So anytime we're dealing with cleaning data, those kind of things become really handy. Okay, so that, should be noted, important to note, you cannot do this. So I have my string x equals this assigned, right? So I'm just dumping some stuff I don't need. So I assigned x is the string this. Then I said, okay, I can treat this as an array, right? So I can be like, all right, so I would like to change the first letter of this to a capital T, right? You guys see that? If you try this, you get this error. String object does not support item assignment. What that means is that you cannot fiddle about with the string array.
Oh, because basically what that's saying is you're saying lowercase t equals uppercase t?
Yep. So this is me trying to reassign the value in that array, right? But the way Python handles strings says arrays, strings, we think of them as arrays, but you cannot fiddle about with them. They're read only, right? So you can use that slicing on them, but that returns a thing, it doesn't change a thing.
Yeah, it doesn't actually, it just returns a copy, right?
Yep.
That's been modified?
Yep. So you cannot actually change a string this way. If you want to change a string, you have to make a copy of it and then do a variable reassignment with the whole thing. Okay? Cool.